there's no denying that we will lose businesses and restaurants by the end of this, but those that do manage to hang on and survive through to when times start to change again, I think there'll be some opportunities. So yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, but it's tough times regardless.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. There are no words to explain how the residents of Victoria must be feeling in light of a Stage 4 lockdown in Melbourne and reintroduction of Stage 3 across regional Victoria. The first lockdown stopped the industry in its tracks. The second has a potential long-term ramifications on viability, employment, livelihoods, and mental health. The Deep in the Weeds Quick Bite episodes are meant to be a brief check-in with past guests, but with the concerning landscape in Victoria, this episode is anything but a quick bite. Michael Ryan is the owner of Provenance in the Victorian regional town of Beechworth. Michael, you've just been handed a cruel hand with a Stage 3 lockdown across regional Victoria. How are you feeling at the moment?
Oh, look, we you couldn't help but think this is what was going to happen. And there was that feeling that something was coming. The situation in Melbourne wasn't changing and progressively getting worse. So they just had a feeling that, something had to give, something had to change. And so it's not a complete surprise, but it's still shocking nonetheless, of course.
How have you felt as the cases have escalated and there's been sort of all sorts of theories thrown around and, there was the impending threat of a Stage 4 and reintroduction of Stage 3. What's this period been like for you the last month?
Business-wise, it was obviously, we had experienced quite a downturn from the very busy period of after the after party after the first lockdown. Like our accommodation had, in our 11 years of operation, had never been busier.
Wow.
The restaurant was full every night, as full as we could be, but with our new model and with the size of our restaurant, we could fit in 18 people, but with, 1.5 resits, we were pushing around 30 covers a night, and it was quite viable for us, particularly with the new menu format. So yeah, they were pretty good times for regional Victoria because people were desperate to get out after being locked down, and there was nowhere else to go really. So their only choice was regional, or state-based travel, a bit of interstate travel as well, I guess. But that obviously all changed when things started to go a bit south in Melbourne, and then also at the same time, or a couple of weeks after that introduction of restrictions in Melbourne, was the closing of the border, the New South Wales Victorian border, which has affected us because we're only 100 k's from that, 50 k's from that border. So that was quite an impact. Like one of my staff members is living in New South Wales and hasn't been able to come to work. So yeah, so we basically had no source of customers from either Melbourne or Sydney or any other major regional areas in New South Wales. So yeah, we went back to two to 3 days a week at that point.
When we spoke to you the first time, it was really early on in the pandemic and you weren't really sure sort of what model you're going to do moving forward. What did you change about the restaurant when you finally opened it up, and what was the response to it?
So we decided we just couldn't afford to do a la carte because, like I said in that first episode, it's an expensive option and just, more labour, more wastage. So we just figured we really had to create a model that was very efficient and good for us as well, but also good for the customers as well. So we looked at sort of minimising contact between customers and front of house. So that's when we introduced like a 4-course menu, but with 17 small dishes over 4 courses. So just reducing that interaction between the front of house and customers, which is a little antithetical to hospitality, but sort of where we're at. And then, and it was received very well, so sort of loosely based on that kaiseki format, and customers loved it, we loved it, and I think when we look at reopening, I'll certainly keep that model because it's sort of now a point of difference for us, and it's also a model that I think even in non-restricted times, I think people quite enjoy. So from all of that, I guess we did sort of reinvent the restaurant a bit, and it pushed us in new directions, which we certainly wouldn't have considered previously, I guess. Possibly wouldn't have been brave enough to do previously.
Have you had conversations with your contemporaries in Melbourne with the circumstances that they're dealing with at the moment?
A little bit. Like that's another level of difficulty entirely. What's happening in Melbourne, and yeah, it's a tough time for all those guys in Melbourne, and tougher again. But there's no denying that we will lose businesses and restaurants and by the end of this. But those that do manage to hang on and survive through to when times start to change again, I think there'll be some opportunities. So yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, but yeah, it's tough times regardless. So.
What sort of impact do you think this is going to have on those working in the hospitality industry in Melbourne at the moment?
There'll be a major shrinkage in the whole industry. I think it'll be a smaller industry. There'll be less staff. I mean, I'm already seeing lots of people in hospitality looking at reskilling, looking at a different career path, basically, because hospitality's always been a tough one, I guess. It's not the easiest job in the world, but this has just exacerbated that and made people realise perhaps that's not what they want to be doing for the rest of their life. So I think it'll just be a smaller industry all round for some time.
How are you feeling about the future of your restaurant at the moment and your role in the industry, given the uncertainty at the moment in Victoria?
Well, like I said, I wouldn't use the word confident, but I just think we are definitely going to get on top of this. There's no, we will bring down the numbers. We will get on top of it. I'm pretty confident of that. And so I'm not sure what the next after party lockdown number 2 is going to be like. I think it will still be based on people who have been, particularly in Melbourne, they'll be getting up to 3 months of sort of lockdowns. So there'll be, a desperation to just get out, to go anywhere, but possibly tempered with a little bit more wariness than there was evident in the first after party, I guess. So, yeah, I think there'll be demand, but it's just such a unknown. I think we'll be around, but who knows? I mean, I hope to be around, but sometimes you feel like you don't have complete control over what's happening, so you just got to sort of just work on each little bit at a time. I can't look at the whole picture. I just got to work on this 4 weeks, and then the next 4 weeks, and then the next 4 weeks.
You mentioned earlier that you're busier than you've ever been just after that first lockdown when everyone was, eager to get out. How did you feel about that time? Were you concerned about a possible breakout with that many people travelling at that period of time and moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it was always a consideration, and certainly I'm sure everybody experienced the first few shifts opening up after the lockdown were just completely unsure of the operating systems we should be doing, and it was just a great unknown, I guess. But people are pretty adaptable, and we quickly got into the sort of routine, and it was we thought we were running it pretty well, and we got a lot of feedback that people felt that, we were creating a safe environment for dining. But yeah, in the back of your mind, to have a positive case in your business would just be devastating because there's still a lot of um, sort of negativity based on individual businesses where cases pop up, even though it, most of the time is completely beyond their control. So yeah, that was always in the back of your mind, but your choice was operate your business or not. You couldn't really find a path in between those. So we just ran the business and just did the best we can in terms of cleanliness and hygiene and distancing and all that stuff. And yeah, we were lucky, I guess. So. And the whole area was lucky because the whole of Northeast hasn't had any diagnosed cases, so I'm pretty fortunate.
Having experienced that first lockdown, what's this second one feel like, and are you approaching it differently?
Well, we're actually on holidays. We decided to have 2 weeks off from today because there's a way to use up some holiday pay, and it was very, like I said, we were down to 2 days a week. So, and so yeah, 2 weeks holidays, which is not going anywhere, obviously. Although I am, we were meant to be going to Bray and Igny for dinner and lunch this week. That's obviously cancelled, but yeah. So we are just having 2 weeks off doing nothing. So, well, I won't be doing nothing, but we're not going to be running the restaurant in any sort of form. After that, we'll look at what we're going to do. We'll probably, again, do a small bit of takeaway, but that's really more almost a community service for a town the size of Beechworth with 3,000 people.
Can you tell us a little bit about the sake production that you've been working on?
Look, just starting, like I said, we've got a grant, regional produce grant to look at the possibility of producing sake in Beechworth. There's a few major hurdles to producing sake in Australia, but that's sort of what part of the program is. There's a few people, like there's a guy called Matt who's doing Melbourne sake, which is pretty interesting. So there's kind of a little sort of bubbling underground push to making craft sake in Australia. So we're certainly going to look at the viability of that in Beechworth. I guess it's all part of having more than one avenue of income rather than just relying on the restaurant, because, as has been shown, you kind of do need to have a little bit of diversification, otherwise you can get pretty unstuck.
I know you're very inspired by Japan and Japanese techniques and sake as well. What is it you love about Japanese cuisine and culture?
I love it just partly because it is such a different culture. It's so different from Western culture. It's got a uniqueness, I guess, for compared to a lot of. I mean, every country is unique in its own form, but the uniqueness of Japanese is their passion and their attention to detail, particularly for me, obviously, in the food scene. It's just it's a fun place to go to, really. And I think everybody has discovered that. I mean, the increase in travel to Japan in the last 15 years has been like 200% or something like that, which has created its own problems. But yeah, and I love it. And I guess because I've been going there so many times, I've got to know it at a level that is difficult when you're just travelling to a country once or twice. So, everybody seems to latch on to some place or some country that they really enjoy travelling to. So it could have been somewhere else for me, but Tokyo and Japan in general is a place I've been back so many times. It just feels like a kind of a second home now. So I certainly miss it at the moment. I'm meant to be there in October, but that's not going to happen.
How do you translate that in Australia and in the restaurant? Is there any dishes that you could tell us about that speak of your food?
I guess we're not a Japanese restaurant. What we do is sort of Japanese ingredients and techniques, and I guess specifically, dashi is at the base of our all of our cooking, as it is in Japanese cooking. So instead of, you know, sort of the traditional Western stocks that we're familiar with, dashi is the Japanese equivalent, and it's underlying all Japanese dishes. And it has an aroma that when people smell it, particularly if they've travelled to Japan, when they smell that aroma of dashi, it sort of takes them straight back to their travel in Japan. I get that comment quite a lot. It's
Absolutely.
nice to hear.
It's been a difficult period of time for so many operators. But what are some of the positives that have come to light for you during this time?
For me, I guess the biggest one is the ability to step back and look at your business from the outside. You know, having a bit more time to address things that you normally just wouldn't have had time or the energy to do so. Like, for example, now I've got another 6 weeks to come up with a new menu, which is pretty unheard of. So yeah, I think that is the main thing. It's made us look at our business model and our, you know, and just the restaurant in general, like from decor, from interior to you know, more mundane things. But just sometimes when you're running a business, you just sort of, you're running it day to day, and especially if you're working in the business, which generally with small restaurants you are, it's really hard to sort of step back and look at it holistically. But yeah, certainly give us a chance to remodel our restaurant, and we think we've done that fairly successfully. Obviously, all we need now is customers, which we don't have, but when they do come, we'll be ready, we think.
Regional restaurants have really come to the fore in the last decade in Australia, and particularly Victorian regional restaurants. There's some extraordinary ones across the whole state. How do you think this is going to impact them moving forward?
Look, like I said, I think there will be demand for travel in Australia because, you know, for some time that will be the only option, and even for ourselves, it's sort of it was so easy to travel overseas, and possibly too easy. I don't know how, you know, we've come to the realisation that those mega cheap airfares, just how sustainable were they? And so it was as easy to travel overseas, and sometimes cheaper to travel overseas than travel in your own country. So as fantastic as that was, and I certainly enjoyed it, I just, you know, we've got to think about how sustainable that was. And you kind of, because it's so easy to travel overseas, you forget about your own regions. So I think for a lot of people, they'll rediscover parts of Australia they mightn't have given much thought to for a while. And certainly the road trip will be a great thing again, which was, you know, when I was growing up, which was, well, some time ago, the road trip for us was the Australian holiday. That's what we did as a holiday. So now the Australian holiday, or until recently, the Australian holiday was often a trip overseas. So, rather the holiday for Australians was a trip overseas. So, yeah, I think there'll be, hopefully, you know, I can't predict exactly what's going to happen, but I hopefully see a rebirth of the regional travel in Australia.
What's some of the road trips from your youth that you remember that you can tell us about?
Some pretty horrific ones. Like, we were a big family, 7 kids, 2 adults. I think travelling with a caravan, like 2,500 k trip round up through Flinders Ranges over to Broken Hill around. But I did that road trip from Adelaide through Broken Hill last year, and then back down through Mildura. And I just loved it. It was such a beautiful part of the world, and just beautiful colours and beautiful country. And I kind of really was surprised how much I enjoyed Broken Hill. Great little country town. Yeah, so yeah, there's plenty of great road trips in Australia.
You've experienced lots of things in your career, and you're one of Australia's most noted restaurateurs. What advice would you have for people to navigate through this period in Victoria where everything is so uncertain?
Yeah, like I guess Like we're all experiencing the same situation, but all of our individual circumstances are quite different. So it's hard to, I guess, generalise across all businesses. But certainly for us, was it's always been since the start of the whole shit fight. It's been us minimising our costs and exposure of debt, and just we're a smaller restaurant than we were. We're on all levels. We're smaller wine list, smaller menu, smaller operating hours, but some often think we're actually better for it. And we made a point of not having too many debts to carry through this period, so we made a point at the start of the first lockdown of paying all of our debtors, which was important to us because we knew that we would still need them even during the first lockdown, and also because they were struggling as much as anybody else, and we've always felt that not paying debtors is essentially stealing, really, because it's not your money, it's their money. So that was a big point for us to make sure we had very few debts coming into this, and so we're actually it's particularly after the busy 7-week period we had after the lockdown, we're in a reasonable situation to hopefully weather this particular or this next hurdle, I guess. So, but it's just that real unknown, I guess, about the future. So we're being very conservative in everything we do.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're taking the time for a break and a short holiday, even though you're not travelling anywhere.
Yeah, I might just go from one room to the next. No, I'm going to spend this couple of weeks setting up my koji fermentation chamber. So kind of looking forward to that.
Well, really appreciate your time, and it's been really good to catch up, even though the circumstances aren't fantastic. Good luck with the next period of time, and hopefully next time we speak to you, you've got a full restaurant and everything's back to some sort of level of normality.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to that. We loved that 6-7 week period between these two lockdowns where we really could operate our business at essentially as full capacity as we could, given the restrictions, and everybody loved it. Our staff loved it, customers loved it, and we're really keen to get back in and do that again. But when that will be is yet to be decided, obviously.
All right, mate. Well, stay safe and good luck, and we'll talk soon. This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.